Hi, this is Sharon. A lot of you have written to me in the past, and the only way we've had a chance to chat was over either Facebook or an email. And I'm glad to say that we finally can have an opportunity to do some talking with many of you. Dave and I want to welcome everyone, though, to our first Valley Fever Survivor Teleconference. We know your time is valuable, so we hope that the information we provide today will be helpful to all of you. And we want to do a shout-out to David in the UK and thank him for coming. We're sorry you are suffering from valley fever. At the end of the conference, we will answer questions that were mailed to us prior to the conference and any questions you have now that you'll be attending today. Since we have people here today that are newly diagnosed, some now in remission, those that have chronic valley fever, as well as family members of those that have contracted valley fever, we decided to start this program off with some basic information on valley fever. And for those familiar with this information, please bear with us as we will get to what some call the good stuff soon enough. Valley fever is a common name for coccidioidomycosis, which is a systemic fungal parasitic disease. The coccidioides species are considered the most virulent fungal parasite known to man, and the disease it causes is presently incurable, can be debilitating, and deadly. The coccidioides species lives in the desert soil as a branching chain fungus. When it's time to replicate, it changes its form to what is known as arthrochonidia, and these spores are carried by the wind and often picked up from the desert floor along with the dust. It is, however, free-floating from the dust. All the haboobs only make it worse, but it can be in the air on a beautiful sunny day or hidden in a desert dust storm. The coccidioides species has also been documented to have 500 miles from where it is endemic. As you can see, distance is enormous, and the poor unsuspecting human or animal host doesn't have a chance, as it is invisible to the naked eye. The spore is approximately the same size as an anthrax spore, and that's scary enough. It replicates at such an alarming speed that it overwhelms the healthiest among us. The spore itself grows larger and larger and bursts open with anywhere from 200 to 1,000 endospores, which in turn, each one grows to a full-size spherule and repeats that action again and again. This occurs about every 48 hours. How is anyone's immune system supposed to deal with that kind of attack over and over again? In fact, in 2002, a Navy SEAL team in California had 45% of them come down with valley fever from training outdoors. If the healthiest among us can have this happen to them, it certainly can happen to you and a loved one. It is often said that it is the immunocompromised person that needs to worry about valley fever, but we learned that anyone can get it, and so we dispute that statement. Of course, anyone who already has an immunocompromised system can have a worse case, but the fact that we know that an immunocompetent person, meaning someone that has no immune issues, can get dissemination and can and do die from valley fever. Pregnant women need to be concerned. It is often said that when they are in the third trimester, but I say if someone is pregnant, stay out of the endemic areas completely to be on the safe side. Valley fever has been known on occasion to cross through the placenta to infect the unborn child. And I don't know anyone that would be willing to take that chance and infect their unborn baby. We have heard from thousands of people from all over the world. At last count, I believe it was 155 countries and territories around the world that have visited valley fever survivor. It is often said that this is a local disease or an orphan disease, but when we get into the statistics, you will see that is not true. People from coast to coast and around the world have unfortunately contracted valley fever. Once inhaled, you have this disease for life, even if it goes dormant. The spores damage cells in your body, and the debris they leave over causes the inflammation and thus pain to occur, and that's what most people are feeling. Valley fever can attack nearly every part of the body, and it doesn't have to happen right away. Even decades later, it can be found to reactivate, has caused the most lethal form, coccimeningitis, and the person had died from it that we know of 40 years after the original infection. Reactivations are common, and it's difficult to determine if a case is a new infection or a reactivation. There is a test that sometimes can be used for that purpose, but doctors often don't know about it or care to determine that issue. Most doctors try to say that you are immune once you have valley fever from another infection, but that statement is not entirely correct. You may have an immune resistance, but it may or may not be enough to overcome new spores or even the spores within your body. So as long as you're living in an endemic area, that is the possibility. 65% of all valley fever cases are known to be contracted in Arizona. Due to poor or non-existent reporting, the actual number of infections are not known in Texas, New Mexico, Utah, and even Arizona and California. We constantly hear from patients who ask the doctor if he or she reported the case to the state, and they often say no. I didn't know that I should report it. Not all doctors even do a blood test, so labs are not always done either for tracking purposes. Treatments of antifungals are given, or the doctor sometimes doesn't prescribe anything, telling the patient it'll go away on its own. Sometimes it does go into remission without medication, and sometimes it gets worse and causes unnecessary pain and suffering from surgeries, joints and bones, heart arrhythmias, neuropathy, unimaginable fatigue, central nervous system problems, as well as damaging your eyesight and more. Very often what is said about valley fever is played down by both doctors and the media. Most doctors that we have spoken with concentrate on taking care of their patients rather than being outspoken as to just how bad this disease is. Many doctors, unfortunately, don't even know just how bad it truly is, or that it is regulated as a bioterrorist weapon into anti-terrorism laws. They are the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996 and the Public Health Security and Bioterrorism Preparedness and Response Act of 2002. That's a mouthful in and of itself, just to try to say it. If anybody had questions they hadn't mailed to us in advance, please write them down as we do the rest of the talk, and we'll do our best to get to everybody's questions at the end of the talk. But next, we want to talk about the statistics of valley fever. It is widely believed that only 2% of valley fever infections are diagnosed accurately, leaving, obviously, 98% undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. When we talk about the statistics, we use the CDC's model for estimating the total number of people infected in a year based on the number of laboratory diagnosed cases. I have some stats for Arizona up through August 18, 2012. The top 3 counties are Maricopa, Pima, and Pinal. In Maricopa, there were 7,612 diagnosed cases. Now, that's a terrible number in and of itself. But when you do the math using the CDC model, that actually is an estimated 380,600 people that may have been infected with valley fever through August 18th of this year. In Pima County, the number of cases that they have diagnosed is 1,045. That translates to an estimated number, 52,250 cases of infections, I should say, rather than cases. That's estimated to have occurred. In Pinal County, it was 520 with an estimate of 26,000. The total of all 3 counties estimated so far this year for possible infections is 458,850, nearly 459,000 cases. Now, that sounds pretty serious to me. Even if you went by the original numbers, that's still an enormous amount, just knowing the numbers that they do have. But these numbers are not final, and I had spoken with the epidemiologist a few months back and was told that they are months behind in the counting of reported cases. So no one has the accurate numbers out there, and so they probably will go much higher, which they estimate themselves to me that they will go up much higher. We believe the reporting of cases in California is so far off that to give you numbers would not be beneficial. However, we have some new numbers for cocci cases in 2011. It was shocking. When I saw it, my jaw dropped open. The CDC puts out that the totals for 2011 valley fever cases reported, not estimates, but reported, were 22,634. That is the number known. There has never been a year in the history of any record keeping for valley fever cases to be that exorbitant. It is so high that it's unbelievable. But now when we use the CDC model, infections, the number is even more shocking. I hope you're sitting down. That number is 1,131,700 possible infections for 2011 in the USA. I'm going to repeat that. 1,131,700 possible infections for 2011 in the USA. I have to ask, and perhaps you do yourself, why is there not streaming across your TV sets in Arizona, California, all other endemic zones, as well as every state in the nation talking about this incurable biohazard? Why does the CDC keep tourists in the dark about this incurable disease? And why does the federal government turn the other way about this disease? There are many reasons I could speculate on, but for now, I'll leave you with this and have you answer those questions yourself. I would now actually like to give Dave an opportunity to give you some information, and so I'm going to put him on, and thank you.
Hi, everyone. One of the things that often happens when we've been running valleyfeversurvivor.com is that people always want to write in, what can I do to sue somebody about valley fever? The federal government knows, local state governments know, things have gotten worse and worse. Everybody should know that there's a problem, but what can I do to sue? Very often the statute of limitations is something that's difficult to overcome, often 2 years for personal injury. But someone actually has gotten a measure of relief. Apparently, in the early 2000s, there is a convicted methamphetamine dealer, Arjang Panah. He was in New York, but was transferred into California. And of course, as anyone who's in a prison situation in California, when he was transferred to the Taft Correctional Institution in Kern County, there was a major outbreak there, and he was one of the people infected. The CDC, in fact, knew that there was an outbreak there going on for years, and still, even just being fully aware of that, they transferred this man into that prison, and it's no surprise that he was infected. Most of the time, these lawsuits come in, and the judge will drop it, or it'll be outside the statute of limitations. But what was particularly interesting about this is I was even able to speak to the attorney, Ian Wallach. He said that with the personal injury lawsuit, there was a 2-year statute of limitations, so it was not done as a civil rights case. This was strict personal injury. And for a first in valley fever, this kind of case wasn't thrown out when it was against the federal government for putting him in the federal prison there. And what's interesting also from my conversation with the attorney is that with prisoners, there is legally a special relationship from the state to either inform prisoners ahead of time or to treat them properly, because the prisoner has no choice as to where he will be assigned and has very little information of what they can do or to know what to look out for while they're sick. And when they're specifically put into a place where the infection can occur, that allows the opportunity for the lawsuit to be much clearer. A judge allowed the suit actually to go through, and Wallach and Feldman, the firm that was representing Arjang Panah, they pushed it all the way through to get a settlement with the United States government. So right now, because of putting a convicted felon in Taft's Correctional, the U.S. paid out $425,000 as a settlement. This is not specifically a conviction, or I'm sorry, not a conviction rather, but an admission of guilt. In fact, they specifically wanted to avoid anything as an admission of guilt in exchange for this settlement. But this is as close as we have gotten to actually having a successful suit. One of the obstacles that has happened is that people don't even realize how sick they are, or maybe it activates later as a more severe case, and they don't know to sue right away. But I really believe that the more of these kind of suits take place, the more attention the government will have to see with this. I know that a lot of people don't have a soft spot in their heart for prisoners, but they're going to be let out too. They're going to be free people too. And of course there are places that once they do their time, if this is not a death penalty case, there's no reason to put people at risk for the Valley fever death penalty. We don't want to have that just as a general part of the society. So it's very interesting that this case has proceeded, and maybe there will be future cases that will be able to proceed, perhaps even to win, either against the state or the federal government. One of the questions I want to know is if there are any attorneys who are on this call who are willing to assist Valley fever survivors, volunteers. We do come in contact with so many people who want to be able to sue, but often they don't have the money. In fact, a part of the reason they don't have the money to sue is because of their Valley fever infection. So it's that important that we get people out there. So we'd like to know if there are any attorneys who are willing to assist us as volunteers. This would be pro bono work, Valley fever survivor, although we are not yet registered as a nonprofit organization. This is by no means an organization that can afford to hire an attorney specifically to work on these kinds of things. But we definitely want to be able to help others to be able to come in contact with an attorney who could help them, or perhaps even see some of the ways that we could help build up a legal case for Valley fever. Also in the news, a little bit of some interest about diet, because very often people ask, what is some of the problems that they can get rid of from Valley fever if they correct their diet? And this is true in all cases of all illnesses, and even people without illness, that sugar can cause problems. In fact, I had recently been looking at a book, Foods That Fight Pain, by Dr. Neil Bernard. They were outlining a university study where people were tested on their response to pain due to electrical stimulation that they had in the study, and it was sugar that increased the response to pain. Now, for someone who has Valley fever, it may already have some inflammation and joint pains. That's just one more reason to reduce sugar. People will so often ask, how much sugar can I eat? What is the minimum amount that I can still get in and not experience the pain? I can't answer that, but the correct answer for trying to reduce the pains is none. If for some reason you're doing so spectacularly well that you can introduce some further into your diet, then maybe. But refined sugar is not something that you really want to do for any reason, for health purposes. In fact, it could be toxic to you. It could be regarded as a toxin in that regard. Sugar just has a large number of problems with it beyond anything that anybody should ever want to take in more sugar. So what's kind of interesting is that over the years you may have heard of various so-called antifungal diets. The author Doug Kaufman has a book called The Fungus Cure that has a specific antifungal diet he proposes. Elsewhere there's a proposed anti-candida diet. Maybe there are others. And I don't research how well these diets would work on other fungi since my focus is on valley fever. And of course, I definitely recommend reducing sugar. But a common part of the theories that have been advanced on this is that reducing sugar will starve out the fungus. I certainly don't like the effects of sugar on the body, but let's see what happens in this theory with valley fever. I did some research into the specific metabolism of valley fever within the body. What do the Coccidioides spores inside your body actually do? In the soil, in petri dishes, we can see that valley fever eats carbohydrates. They grow it in a sugar medium. But what is really important to know is that this is the form that would be in the soil, the branching chain mycelia. It is not the parasitic spherule. In order to turn into a spherule, the Coccidioides spores must have ornithine decarboxylase. This is not something you're going to run into normally in typical conversation. But the most important thing to know about that is that actually ornithine is a protein, and within the body, the spherules eat polyamines, which are some amino acids, ornithine and arginine, amino acids again that relate specifically to proteins. So these amino acids that are used to form protein within the body are what the spherules eat and what is necessary in order for the spherule to become what it is. So could it eat sugar as a parasite? Theoretically, yes. In fact, there are some cases where people have had the soil form of it, the branching chain mycelia, inside their bodies. That's regarded as rare, but I had to wonder, is it possible that they just had so much sugar that maybe it could turn into that to survive rather than the normal parasitic form? But it's kind of strange to think that without any of this specific compounds to find it, the parasitic spherule, the thing that does most of the damage in the body, for all the health problems sugar causes, these spherules can't do their dirty work without the building blocks of protein. So let's say you wanted to starve out valley fever. Certainly you wouldn't have the carbs for the sugar for that, and you wouldn't have protein either. And this would essentially lead to starvation. But aside from the starvation you would experience, it wouldn't really work to fight valley fever, because your body needs free proteins for the amino acid pool. Basically, it means your body starts treating itself like a junkyard, scrapping protein from good organs, good bones, and good muscle, and it turns that into the raw resources it needs for basic functions. But when it does that, valley fever spores can get a hold of it too. So if you're not going to starve out valley fever, you can stop eating the things that make you less healthy or less capable of fighting infection, and you focus on the things that you can eat that will make you more capable and more healthy and better able to fight infections that way. So for a few of the eating strategies, you need to be able to think a little bit differently about eating at different points. And I'm going to pass the phone on to Sharon about that.
Okay, now that we totally blew your mind with the sugar and the protein, I'm going to be adding on to that a little bit here. I'm going to start with moving into the various stages of valley fever, which will also then be about food, diet, vitamins, live foods, and freeze-dried foods. But learning to eat properly is more than survival. It actually means living healthier, being stronger, having energy, and feeling that life is worth living so you can enjoy it. We mentioned that we're going to be doing a special bonus about how easy it is to make one of the finest foods out there, and we'll be having Dave deal with that in a little while. But early valley fever, well, in the beginning, it can be extremely challenging, as many of you know. Many times you're just suddenly feeling sick and don't know what is wrong with you. You go to the doctor and he doesn't know either, but sends you home with the wrong medicine for the wrong problem. And I know I've heard that 1,000 times over or more. And if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, I'd be a rich lady. But unfortunately, that happens to many people. You continue to get worse, sometimes for weeks, months, and even years before the proper diagnosis is finally made. Sometimes it never is, unfortunately, in some people. But by that time, it may have disseminated. For me, I became suddenly and dramatically ill and almost died. Now, we go to dormant valley fever. Once you contract valley fever, the hope is to get it to go dormant since it cannot be eradicated. The antifungal drugs work in under 70% of the cases, and the purpose of giving them is not to totally eliminate it, but rather to get the population of this fungal parasite down so that your own immune system will take over and get it to go dormant. Once dormant, you need to keep it that way, or it can reactivate to wreak havoc even decades later, causing, hate to say it, but surgeries, amputations, or even death. This is not meant to scare anybody on the call, but it's meant to tell you just how important it is to get your immune system stronger and to know what to look out for so that you don't have to worry about that happening to you. When valley fever presents as a chronic issue, and for many people, valley fever literally steals your soul and the essence of who you were. You are no longer self-sufficient, joyful, energetic, and creative. And many family members do not understand what you're going through, which is why we have a particular chapter in Valley Fever Epidemic helping family members to understand what their loved one is going through. You look normal on the outside, but inside you're being constantly attacked, dealing with inflammation, pain, and suffering. And once again, the best way to improve and fight your valley fever is to learn to eat, to rev up your immune system, cut down your inflammation so that you can feel better and live better. In the long-term, lifetime eating strategies for valley fever is therefore the one most important thing you can do for your body, mind, and life. There are 3 things I'd like to suggest that you do right away, and they are keep yourself hydrated, learn to let go of stress, and that's a toughie for many of us. And one of the real most important things that I found with people that get valley fever is that they don't love themselves enough. You have to put yourself first, last, and foremost with this disease. You deserve to get better, you deserve to be well, and you deserve to feel good. Most people think they drink enough water every day, but they don't. You really need to drink at least 8 to 10 glasses of water a day. And the best way to keep track is to start a piece of paper somewhere nearby and do a tally so that you know when you did drink your glass of water, and so you'll know that you are keeping up with what you should have. Because many diseases literally don't get to stick if your body is hydrated properly. You should give up all forms of soda, juices, etc. The only thing you should be mostly drinking daily is filtered water. Eliminate all refined sugars from your diet, and you're going to constantly hear us always say that. Sugar is the enemy, actually toxic, and causes inflammation. Drinking green tea and white tea can be helpful. There's even scientific studies of how it puts cancer in remission and even prevents some cancers. The only exception I take to anything that contains some natural sugars for a drink is coconut water. I use the Vita Coco brand, so I can't speak for any other brand. The reason for that is that it can restore your electrolyte balance, which in many times going to help you when you're sick with valley fever, because your electrolytes are off very often. In an 11-ounce container, you have 680 milligrams of potassium, and that is a huge amount of potassium to help you. You don't have to drink the entire 11 ounces at one time, nor do I recommend that you drink the whole thing at one time, but you can. But it is the most powerful source I know of that helps tremendously to give immediate and lasting relief when your electrolytes are out of balance. I never recommend Gatorade. That just has way too much sugar, and this accomplishes much more and is better for you. No cakes, donuts, soft drinks, juices, ice cream, muffins, or any sugary items at all once you contract valley fever. Even bread should not be eaten, especially in the early stages, and not in abundance thereafter. If you have any inflammation, you should avoid those carbs as well for the future. For good health, even without valley fever, they should be eliminated. You can never go back to eating junk food again, or you pay the price in how you feel and weaken your immune system.
Incidentally, as someone who's relatively healthy, I can also attest that even if you are healthy, you can pay the price in how you feel by eating those things after you've been eating healthy for a while. It's really nice. It makes a difference to eat good foods.
And he knows that because he himself tried to have a dessert when he went out to eat with a bunch of people. And he had a dessert, and after he ate it, he said, I didn't feel really good about it at all. I don't know why I ate it. It was there. Everybody else had it, so I tried it too. And so he's talking from experience because David eats very well, and he looks like it too. But I'll go back to where I was. But I look at it this way. How much is feeling better or feeling good mean to you? Is feeling fatigued and in pain worth eating what I call crap? Once you start eating better foods, you suddenly notice that you are feeling better, less pain, or become pain-free, more energetic, and you're happier again. Changing how you eat is for life and not just temporary. You can eliminate other issues that way as well. You can eliminate high blood pressure, diabetes, some heart issues. You'll automatically lose weight, cancers, etc. I have never gone back to junk food because when you feel better, you want to stay that way, and you don't want to take the chance of waking up that dormant monster in your body, meaning coccidioides species for valley fever. You need to change your diet to live and get well to be the best you can be. The other thing that we have not mentioned yet is to permanently give up alcohol and smoking. We don't have the time to go into much about it here today, but your liver has enough to deal with the medications you're on, and those two items are extremely harmful and can cause other health issues, which most everybody here should be aware of. Now to get to what to eat and how to eat for life. First, nothing should be eaten or drank in excess before or after contracting valley fever. For your proteins, I would suggest chicken, fish, only lean meat, turkey, occasional eggs, and a particular brand, Fage yogurt, which is a Greek yogurt. It can be found at Costco. It's much cheaper there than anywhere else. And I like it because it's high in protein, virtually no fats, and is low in sugar. And you should also give up any flavored yogurts, unless you're eating it with some natural berries. But because of the sugar content, I wouldn't do that. You give up fried food for life, and I know a lot of people think, I can't do that. But you have to decide, is it your health or is it your suffering that you dislike more? When it comes to carbohydrates, a major factor in what to eat is its glycemic load. This refers to the speed at which the carbohydrate is turned into sugar and puts it into your system. Low glycemic load foods like fibrous vegetables and beans are almost always healthy, and for other reasons too. Fruit gives you high sugar fruits such as, give up high sugar fruits such as grapes, watermelon, other melons, etc. At the very least until your VF is dormant and you are feeling much better. I still don't eat most fruits like that, except for mainly what I eat are blueberries, which are your brain berries, raspberries, and strawberries. I do recommend apricots in season. Please give up all processed foods for life. You don't need or want the downside of chemicals used for processing. Many of them cause all sorts of diseases, including cancer, and are unhealthy to ingest. I'm going to turn this back to Dave, and he's got some more information for you.
Okay, with other carbohydrates, since she was running down some of the types of foods, it's important to know that beans have the lowest glycemic load and a variety of other health-promoting benefits. There's anti-cancer effects that I've read about, anti-angiogenesis, which is the promotion of blood vessels that also leads to cancer. There are just so many benefits from that, antioxidant benefits. There's a lot to it. There are other starches such as black rice and some other brown rice that have been known to have additional benefits, and we hope to discuss more about some of the benefits of these foods in the future. For a low glycemic load, avoid potatoes except for an occasional one, and only small portions of yellow or red potatoes, and yams and sweet potatoes are somewhat better than that. Interestingly, recent studies have shown that cold potatoes do not have the same high glycemic load as warm ones. Squash is okay, but you should probably forget about toppings. Oats, barley, buckwheat, quinoa, and amaranth are among the best grains. And there's a lot to say about grains for another conference, and there are reasons some have to debate the usefulness of any dietary carbohydrates. There are some people with a research-backed belief that there should be total exclusion of grains, beans, and potatoes from the diet. But there is also contradictory research that shows a tremendous benefit from the proper use of these carbohydrates. So we have to get into more details in a later call. There are some doctors who have cured diseases nutritionally, and their ongoing research will be a part of a future book as well as for future Valley Fever Survivor conferences. One of the things that's a lot easier that you can do, regardless of how you change your diet, is just to change some of what you put on your food. For example, with spices. A variety of spices can be helpful to relieve cellular damage from oxidation, and those could be things like basil, oregano, cloves, and turmeric. And some spices even fight inflammation, like sage, ginger, and cinnamon. One of the least talked about, most effective, and highly studied ways of helping your health may be with sprouts. Some people who don't like alfalfa sprouts may be saying, yeah, at this point, but just stay with me. Brassica sprouts in particular. Brassicas are a family of vegetables that include collard greens, mustard, cabbage, cauliflower, and broccoli. And as it turns out, they are highly effective against a variety of ailments. Some people will also be glad to know that they taste nothing like their vegetable form. Broccoli sprouts have been the most studied and have been shown to fight a variety of toxins and cancers, and as well problems like high blood pressure, macular degeneration, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, and complications of diabetes and more. So how can this work? The sprouts have the compound sulforaphane and its precursor glucoraphanin. And these are found in high quantities in brassica sprouts, particularly broccoli. Sulforaphane has a strong ability to eliminate toxins and to boost the effect of other antioxidants within the body. So this is a 1-2 punch with this, and perhaps more as research continues to validate more benefits of it. Some research even indicates sprouting about for 3 days produces the most sulforaphane in the broccoli sprouts. So the way that I would produce them is first soak them for about 8 hours in a jar. Then you would use either a sprouting lid specifically for the purposes, or you can even use cheesecloth to pour that, or a strainer of some kind. Then put them back in, let them be able to germinate, spending time away from the jar, and then rinse with cold filtered water just to make sure that you get to wash any impurities away, and at the same time to keep them cold and moisturized. And just do that every 12 hours until the 3 days are up, and the sprouts are actually quite delicious. I like having a brassica mix so I can have things from mustard sprouts, cabbage sprouts. It tastes 100 times better than the actual vegetable, although I like the vegetables too. But you don't even need a lot when you think about it. 1/2 cup of broccoli sprouts will equal the amount of sulforaphane and other phytonutrients of 50 pounds of raw broccoli. You won't necessarily get the same amount of protein and fiber and such because the broccoli itself grows, but most of the concentrated nutrients that are only found in these quantities and in the brassicas is in the seed. So you get the best of the phytonutrients from sprouting the seed and making that's a edible food. And it's delicious, and I'd say it's probably one of the best, cheapest, and most healthy things that you can do. But another fast way you can boost the nutrients in your diet is really easy with freeze-dried vegetables. A variety of places sell freeze-dried vegetables on the internet, but often a spoon of a freeze-dried vegetable, like leafy greens, for example, could equal pounds of the fully hydrated product. So in some ways, that would be more effective than vitamins. You could get all kinds of nutrition as well as getting the protein. Well, it would be like a green salad. Of course, you want to have the leafy green salads as well, but this is another way to help. And then, in a totally different direction of health, coconuts, and by extension coconut oil, have a few other benefits. first, people will look at the saturated fat content of coconut oil, and sometimes they will just freak out. Oh, no, it's almost entirely saturated. But the truth is that there are many kinds of saturated fats. Lauric acid is found in higher concentrations in coconut oil than anywhere else, and it is a tremendous immune system booster with some types of illnesses that have cell walls that are difficult to deal with. So this has been studied to reduce the viral load in HIV patients. This is just really incredible. With the lauric acid being able to be taken in, ingested, the body being able to reduce a viral load. When you think about how serious HIV is, that is deadly, and so deadly universally. Valley fever itself can be deadly too, but not as universally so. So it's important when you see something with promise against such a severe disease, and then you know it's also been studied for effectiveness against other bacterial and viral problems, it certainly seems like it might be useful for anyone seeking to boost the effectiveness of their immune system. It has not been tested at all in valley fever cases. But just knowing what else it has done, the goal is to feel better, so you're more able to fight your valley fever. And you certainly don't want to be sidelined by 2 or more diseases, so this is just another thing that you can do to help. And in fact, with olive oil also having well-known benefits from having the monounsaturated fats and some of the anti-inflammatory and cardiovascular benefits from that, I like to use olive oil or coconut oil for dressing, just 1 to 2 tablespoons a day. It helps nutrient absorption as well as the other benefits previously mentioned. And I'll turn it over to Sharon for some more about seeds and nuts.
When you eat various seeds and nuts, my suggestion would be almonds because they're the highest in protein and lowest in fat. But when you eat healthy, you don't even have to worry about the fats and nuts at all. So that's a really good feature to have. And if you have salads often, and you can put a lot of really great things on salads and then put your coconut oil, a tablespoon or 2 of coconut oil on your salads, it really tastes delicious, and you're not getting all the calories from unwanted store-bought dressings that you really don't need. Greens are extremely important. You get rid of the useless head of lettuce and eat spinach, things like arugula, and other mixed lettuce for salads. Tomatoes, you put nuts, cabbage, kale, collard greens, mustard leaves, parsley, cilantro, egg. You can put an eggplant. So anything that, and water chestnuts, and that's really good to have. Now, cayenne pepper is a central circulatory stimulant. If you use cayenne on a regular basis, you'll improve the natural cleansing mechanism of your entire body. And this is particularly helpful in conditions of arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, and many other chronic illnesses. So you may want to speak to your doctor about that and see what he has to say. And the other vegetable that I'd like to mention right now is beets. Now, beets are definitely known as a sugar beet. You've always probably heard the term sugar beets. They have lots of sugar. But beets have higher levels of nitric oxide. And I don't know if Dave had any plans on mentioning that today, but maybe he could say a word or 2 about that, because your nitric oxide level could be much lower than it should be when you are ill, and by eating foods rich in nitric oxide, it could help you tremendously with valley fever and other issues.
In fact, one of the things that's a little bit surprising that I found after reading about how useful nitric oxide is to keep people feeling energetic is that some of the polyamines that valley fever eats are precursors to the production of nitric oxide. So there's a reason why you feel kind of sluggish with valley fever. It's taking away your ability to produce it in the right quantities. That was surprising to me.
So you may want to consider putting beets. I don't like beets. And the only way, I don't like collard greens, and I don't particularly like kale. But we have found great ways to eat it, and it's really wonderful. And so I'd like to pass that along to you guys. One is in that brassica mix, which has the broccoli sprouts in it. It also has cabbage, but it also has kale and mustard seed in there. So it tastes nothing like the vegetables. Trust me, nothing It doesn't resemble the vegetables at all. And it's great to put in soups. It's great to put in salads. And half a cup of that of a brassica mix equals 50 pounds of the nutrients that David was talking about in broccoli in there. So who could eat 50 pounds of broccoli? I don't know anybody that could do that or would want to. So you gain a lot more in your micronutrients and your phytonutrients in sprouting. We also sprout different types of beans, and we will eventually be doing a entire segment on a new program that we have, Blog Talk Radio, which will go in depth on sprouting, so that don't feel that, well, I didn't get it all. We'll have it there, and you can have it once we put it up, that you'll be able to review it as many times as you need to get the information from there. But there's another item that I found and did research on, and that's chia seed. Now, most of you probably heard of chia seeds in the form of the commercial on Chia Pets. But chia seeds are high in fiber, the omega-3s, the alpha-linoleic acids, which is different from what you get from your fish oils for omega-3s. And it's said to help with irritable bowel syndrome, cardiovascular system, contains twice the amount of protein found in grains, and at times the level of antioxidant, and 3 times the level of antioxidants found in blueberries. It's packed with boron, which helps you to absorb calcium. Chia also has 3 times the amount of iron over spinach. Chia is best known for its essential fatty acids, but there are a few known side effects. But since they count, because they have, a high level of B vitamins, it should best not be taken with a B supplement vitamin because you don't want to overload on your B vitamins. It is 20% protein with all the essential amino acids. I would suggest you talk to your healthcare professional and ask about taking it. I found that it helps with fatigue dramatically. Now it's been about 8 months since we've been eating sprouts, and as well as having the chia seed, and my fatigue has gone by, I'd say, 98 to 99%. I'm a lot more active. I would say I'm about as close to normal as I'll ever be. I use 1 tablespoon a day. Some people suggest 2 tablespoons, but I take 1 tablespoon a day. I mix it with the Fage yogurt, or I'll put it in soup, or I can put it on a salad. It goes in anything. It doesn't matter, just as long as you have it, and drink it down. Make sure you have enough water because it literally turns into, mucilage, yep. And you need to make sure you have enough water in your body. It's also said to lower LDL, raise HDL, and lower triglycerides. And if you need to avoid phosphorus, you may want to stay away from chia. But otherwise, I just gave you the rundown and all the good aspects of it, and I would highly recommend that you do that. I can't begin to stress enough how wonderful that's been for me to use. But it's the combination of the sprouts. And we make soups with the raw kale and the raw collard greens and spinach, and we add other things to it. And if you need to know how to do some of these things, we can do that as well. But many of you probably heard of Vitamix. I don't work for the company. The company does not discount anything to me, but I love that Vitamix. Vitamix is probably one of the best all-around soup makers and frozen good makers and so forth, most reliable. It's been around for a very long time. Excellent motor, and we use that every single day. We make a lot of soups that way. You can make vegetable drinks that way, a lot of healthy drinks that way, and I strongly suggest anybody that could look into it. They even sell it at Costco, but they sell it from Vitamix.com. You can check into it there. And if you go to Costco, find out when they do demonstrations so you can see it in action, taste some of the foods that they make with it, so you can familiarize with it. But making soups that way, and it only takes 5 minutes once, or maybe 7, depending on what the soup is, to go from a cold soup of just ingredients to a soup ready to eat, and that's for 4 people. So if it's only for 1 or 2 people, you make less ingredients, you don't need to run it that long. But that's another excellent way of getting what you need. And I'm going to pass this back to Dave because I wanted to tell you about nikkomycin Z. A lot of people have heard that nikkomycin Z is being worked on for a possible cure for valley fever, and Dave's got some information for you.
Okay, this is, if for people who have been following valley fever for a while, this is almost the holy grail because there are a few hidden stories behind the world of valley fever research. They're only known to a few people, but the big one is the compound nikkomycin Z. This is a proposed drug that may in fact be a cure to valley fever because it cleared the lung of fungus in preliminary testing. So clearance is a very, very specific scientific term. Most antifungal drugs will just reduce the population of the fungus to the point where your immune system can fight the effects of the rest of the fungi that are there. That's the hope with all of the available antifungal drugs that currently fight valley fever. But clearance is another matter. When something is cleared from the lung, it is not detectable. It's just gone. And nikkomycin Z has been shown to clear the lungs of fungus. Not leave low but active amounts, and not reduce titers, but when it talks about clearance, it clears the fungus from the lung. And this was in mice, yes. But this is why people more familiar with the compound want it to be a drug for valley fever, for people, and even for pets to try this out.
Tell them when they found that out.
I'm working on it. We're going to go for a little history on this. In the 1970s, it was evaluated by Bayer. This is the same pharmaceutical company famous for making the aspirin products. And in the 1970s, they were thinking about it as an agricultural fungicide. And then in the 1980s, there were some studies that had been testing on mice, and it appeared to have cured the mice of their cocci infection. So their valley fever infection seemed to have been gone. And then what did they do with this? Well, that's very interesting. Apparently no further work was done for a while, occasional tests, but not a whole lot. Then somebody picked it up. It was Shaman Pharmaceuticals. This was a company in the 1990s. They had big dreams. They weren't going to be some big, heartless conglomerate that just goes out and beats the crap out of local indigenous populations while taking stuff. They were going to go out to the rainforest and do all kinds of property sharing, or profit sharing rather, and make sure there's adequate compensation for the local people involved. And they were looking for all kinds of interesting and novel drugs that could be found in the rainforest. And maybe it would have been nice if they were more heartless and ruthless, because they went out of business, and that was unfortunately shortly after they had purchased the rights to nikkomycin Z. They actually started a little bit more testing with it. So then it went by the wayside again until 2001, where it was purchased at an auction by California State University at Bakersfield. And then they had it for a while, weren't able to do a whole lot with it. In 2005, the rights were transferred to the University of Arizona. In 2006, it was designated as an orphan drug because of some of the rules that they were able to use to finagle cocci into that title. Because valley fever is not known to infect, based on diagnosed cases in the United States, more than 2,000 people to get an orphan drug, or 200,000 to get an orphan drug designation. However, it's interesting how they designate that, because the estimates of overall infection would make it far higher. But if people don't know that they're infected because they're only estimated based on certain rules, then they wouldn't know to use the drug. So it's sort of a catch-22 as to how it's designated. But regardless, there were millions of dollars in grants, and the University of Arizona was able to start some trials. So as it stands now, it's being investigated. It's the dream to get this to work, but right now it's just not there. It's not getting the level of scrutiny that it needs under research because there's not enough funding. With federal grants having provided the funding, the research was done. It was never funded with pharmaceutical companies, or never outside corporations to a serious degree. But the fact is that it exists after all these years. And with so little research behind it, but all of the research good, it remains a frustrating but hopeful part of valley fever history. And hopefully the future too. Yes, hopefully the future. And I believe the next step, I'll turn over to Sharon.
I thought that was really interesting. I'm glad he was able to provide that here today. The other things I want to say, it's important to take probiotics. Many of you don't take it. Many of you do. I would like to say that I have found a particular brand that I thought works well for me. Once again, I have nothing to do with the company, but I found that it works for me, and so you might want to check it out yourselves. It's called Ultimate Flora. It's a refrigerated item, and you could get it in a lot of different places. Depending on your age, you would go with the adult or the senior formulas. I don't know whether they have for a young person. I don't know that. I haven't looked into it, but they do have those. I also wanted to talk just a little bit about different foods that basically boost your immune system. And so I just want to give you kind of a list to go by so you kind of know a little bit of what you could do there. And, of course, live cultured yogurt, oats, barley, red onions, not the white ones, the red ones, salmon, chicken soup, sweet potatoes and yams, carrots, squash, maitake and reishi mushrooms, green tea and black tea, decaf if possible, the L-theanine, I don't know if I know how to say that correctly, is responsible for the immune boosting, and 3 ounces of lean beef contains 30% of the daily value for zinc, and zinc increases your T cells to fight infection. So these are just some more foods that you could think of to help boost your immune system. When it comes to vitamins, the type you take does matter. You avoid all vitamins that have fillers, binders, and colorings in them, because a lot of people aren't aware of it, but they have reaction to those fillers, binders, and colors. So you want to avoid that. Anybody would be interested in where I get mine, I could tell you about that too. Once again, I don't work for the company. I never get a discount or anything, but I just like their products because they don't have any of that stuff. I also would avoid all tablets whenever possible. I know sometimes it's not possible for medicines, but it is possible entirely for vitamins. And because most tablets are not completely dissolved in the stomach, so you're not getting the dose you thought you were getting. So stick to capsules whenever you buy vitamins. I could give you actually a long list of vitamins, but I'm just going to stick today to just some of the most important daily vitamins to have. And due to time constraints, I won't be able to go into depth on everything here. But I would recommend that you check with your doctor again to see if there are any interactions with other medications you're taking, because some people are on many different medications, so some things have different effects depending. I would recommend CoQ10, alpha-lipoic acid, N-acetylcholine, pycnogenol, vitamin D, omega-3s, acetyl-L-carnitine, which is great for your heart, liver support, eye support, which includes bilberry, lutein, and zeaxanthin, astaxanthin, which is great not only for your eyes, but it has much better value of, it's better than vitamin E, and resveratrol, and many of you have heard of that one. So there are lots of reasons to take vitamins and also to get some of this stuff in your food. Just to give you an example of one of the things I mentioned about alpha-lipoic acid, it prevents or actually impedes cell oxidation, which is destruction by free radicals. The alpha-lipoic acid helps deactivate a wide array of cell-damaging free radicals in many bodily systems. It's a powerful weapon in the fight against the oxidative stress as people age, and even the incidence of eye problems such as macular degeneration, cataracts increase due to free radical damage from things such as smoking or poor nutrition, exposure to ultraviolet light. So having alpha-lipoic acid is a really great thing to have. And the bilberry for your eyes, even during World War II, pilots were actually given bilberry jam to improve their night vision during their evening sorties. So that gives you an idea there. Glutathione, which is an amino acid that protects the tissue surrounding the lenses of the eyes. And numerous studies link glutathione with the prevention of cataracts, glaucoma, retinal disease, diabetic blindness. And some of the foods that are rich in glutathione levels include sulfur-rich foods such as garlic, eggs, asparagus, and onions. And even though we talked about not having watermelon is one of them, not in the beginning stages that you should have that, asparagus, and, of course, grapefruits. And grapefruits, of course, are known to have interaction with certain medications, so you have to be careful there. So I just wanted to give you an idea of why some of this stuff is really important. And as David mentioned earlier, all this and so much more is going to be in a book that we're going to have out there, which will be so thorough, just like Valley Fever Epidemic, and give you everything you need to know and understand why it is important, so you can make the choices of what's important to you with what's going on in your body and what you need to benefit by. In fact, just one other thing that's really important that I did mention was the N-acetylcysteine, the NAC. That's also amino acid, and it's a building block of protein. It helps to stimulate the production of antioxidants by replenishing the body's level of glutathione. And so NAC, I should say, is thought to both stave off disease and play an important role in boosting the immune system. And we could go on and on and on, but that'll have to be for another conference that we have. But I wanted everybody to be aware of that. And I had so much to say that I don't even know if I did tell you that it can affect the eyes. And I had an eye problem due to it. I have optic nerve damage because of valley fever. I never had the spots in the eyes as a lesion, but because I had coccymeningitis, it was able to damage my optic nerve. And anybody, whether you know it or not, and I didn't even know it, could have this problem or have other problems with their eyes due to valley fever. So I strongly recommend that everyone see a retinologist, have your eyes thoroughly mapped and checked by a retinologist, because a standard ophthalmologist missed my problem, and I thought that doctor was really good. So you may have that happen to you too. So if you see an eye doctor, you have valley fever, do see a retinologist. Make sure you have no problems, because you don't want to lose your eyesight. So now I'm going to turn it back to Dave, and shortly thereafter we'll be answering some questions that came to us and any questions that you have.
Okay, before we get into the Q&A, we also want to remind you of places that there are of ways that you can get some support for valley fever even when you're not on teleconference call. There's our main site, valleyfeversurvivor.com. It's the headquarters for all of our information, help people understand valley fever. It also has the Valley Fever Survivor message board, a tremendous resource where everyone with valley fever and their families are welcome to discuss the related matters. We have over, wait a minute, just a second, 1,100 registered users. Wow, that's a lot. That's even more than I expected. And more than 10,000 posts on the board. You can join us on Facebook as a friend of Valley Fever Survivor to be kept up to date. And also we have the Facebook Valley Fever Survivor support group. Once you friend Valley Fever Survivor there, we can have you join the support group, because this support group is set up with Facebook's highest privacy settings. So if you want to discuss medical information, it won't be accessible on Google or other search engines, and not to have that kind of private information be associated with your name on a board. We thought that was the best way to handle that. And then also Valley Fever Survivor has a lot of online YouTube, and that would be a nice way for you to be able to benefit from having a lot of things that you could share with others about valley fever.